Greetings, lovely people, and welcome to Fast Track Reviews, where in this video we're going to be talking about Captain America Brave New World. So first off, I just want to say, yes, I'm very late to this one. I have not been really feeling Marvel as of late, and it is unfortunate because two of the films that I was most looking forward to have come out, that being Brave New World and Thunderbolts, and up until now, I hadn't seen either of them. Now, of course, I've seen Brave New World, and I have a lot of thoughts to get into, so with that being said, let's just get straight into it, and of course, spoilers from this point onwards. I'm not going to be cutting it down into non-spoiler and spoiler. I think the film is alright. If you haven't seen it yet, and you are a fan of Marvel, you're probably going to enjoy it, but let's get into the details. So, to start off, we see the election of Thaddeus Ross as US President, played now by Harrison Ford. Of course, rest in peace to William Hurt, great actor, gone too soon, all that kind of thing. Which, honestly, before watching the film, I thought that Harrison Ford as Thaddeus Ross was a strange choice. He is such a recognizable actor, and, you know, replacing William Hurt with someone who doesn't really look too much like him, nor really has the same sort of, I don't know, vibe as an actor, felt very weird. But throughout this, Harrison Ford has done an excellent job. He by no means is a standout performance in this, and I'll get into that in a moment. But, yeah, replacing William Hurt was a huge ask, and Harrison Ford legitimately does a decent job in this role, and in general, Ross was a pretty good part of the film. And yeah, it also creates a lot of in-universe questionable things, like the fact that there are pictures of, you know, Harrison Ford's Ross with Betty, even though, you know, we obviously only ever saw Betty with William Hurt. It's a little bit inconsistent in that way, but I understand the way they had to do it, and honestly, I think they were very respectful of how they actually represented Thaddeus Ross's continued existence in the MCU, and it's a lot better than, you know, killing him off just because the actor died. You know, a lot of the time, characters are defined by their actor. I feel like a character like Thaddeus Ross has more stories to tell, and I think it was a good idea to recast him, even if it's, you know, a little questionable grabbing Harrison Ford at the age he is. But with that being said, I think the whole turn of President Thaddeus Ross and everything like that was a very good choice, and in general, I do like that character. We see Abe's bar, which is actually a bit of a deep cut into Red Hulk lore, which was funny enough. It is actually a bar that is destroyed by Red Hulk in one of the comics, which I thought was just a nice little reference, just a fun little thing. But yeah, Sam is well and truly shown to be Captain America in this film. I know that sounds like a huge sidestep, but we are introduced to Sam again in Abe's bar, and legitimately, Anthony Mackie, excellent actor, love him so much, and Sam Wilson is shown to be Captain America. He is so good. The action scenes surrounding Captain America, Sam, whatever, are excellent, and that is shown really well with the first fight between him and the Serpent Society, which, yes, the Serpent Society are finally here. That was, of course, something that was teased, you know, meta-wise, a very long time ago, as it was the subtitle for what ended up being Captain America the Winter Soldier. It was originally teased as being Captain America the Serpent Society, which I think is a fun turnaround of we're finally actually seeing them in, you know, live action. It's a really fun little thing there. But yeah, we also have Joaquin Torres Falcon, which is good to see him actually, you know, in the suit and everything. I don't love that Falcon suit. I feel like the clothes are a bit too muted. I don't love it, especially compared to Cap's outfit, which is, you know, the full red, white, and blue, and is really bright and colourful and everything. When it comes to Falcon's outfit, it's just like green and grey, and I don't know, I feel like it needs something a little bit brighter. I'm not necessarily needs to be, you know, red and white or anything like that, like classic Falcon colours or anything, but just something a little bit of a pop of colour. Maybe a brighter green would really bring it out, just something a little bit different, something that actually makes him a little bit more standout. We are also shown Isaiah Bradley, who of course is one of the interim Captain Americas. We of course were first introduced to him during The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and yeah, there's just a lot of good characters brought back into this, and it all leads up to a meeting in the White House between Cap and Ross, where he is asked to rebuild the Avengers. And it has to be said that it's an interesting choice how this never gets concluded. We never actually see the creation of an Avengers team. We get hints to it. We obviously can assume that it's going to be Captain America and the Falcon as, two members, and we do get a few mentions of Ant-Man throughout the movie, which implies, once again, Ant-Man's probably an Avenger at this point. But yeah, in terms of the overall roster and the state of the Avengers, in terms of members that could possibly join it, it is a little bit up in the air. We obviously have had hints towards certain characters like Shang-Chi and Wong and, Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel being part of the current Avengers team. But this is really the closest we've had to actually having a concrete Avengers team, and it's only 2 members. It's hard to say what the future plans are going to be, obviously leading into Doomsday. There are a lot of questions around what the Avengers are doing and who the Avengers actually are. But the fact that this is the first film that's fully explored the idea of rebuilding the Avengers, I think is a very interesting thing to actually talking about. And I look forward to what the future of the MCU actually does. Obviously, Thunderbolts being like a spin-off, not quite the Avengers-style team. I'm very interested in seeing what happens with those. But yeah, going on and on and on, we have Celestial Island, and of course, if you watch Eternals, you already know about this, but there is a giant Celestial that came out of the ground and was turned into what we can assume to be adamantium, primarily. Because, adamantium is now in the MCU. Of course, that is the metal that is infused over Wolverine's skeleton and unlocks a lot of potential for the future of the MCU. Of course, it is, shown to be a stronger material. We don't explicitly see it, but it is described, should I say, as a stronger material than vibranium, which I think makes a lot of sense for the state of the MCU. It doesn't necessarily make sense in the wider multiverse, but specifically for the MCU 616 universe, it makes a lot of sense that adamantium is the strongest material. It's a little bit questionable overall, but yeah, the whole proto-adamantium thing with Cap's shield is always brought into question, and yeah, having vibranium, proto-adamantium, and actual adamantium all together in the MCU does make a lot of sense, with those being, from weakest to strongest. Arguably, it's kind of up in the air for the most part, but yeah. We then have the major, conflict of the movie, which is when Mr. Blue by the Fleetwoods plays Isaiah, the Secret Service, military, various other armed individuals will just, turn on people and in, the initial case, shoot the president, or attempt to, because obviously Ross doesn't die. But this is a very tragic moment. We've, followed Isaiah through the events of Falcon and Winter Soldier and up to this point, and we know his trauma, we know his history, and how really tragic it all is, and the fact that he spent so long behind bars, really for no reason, just because they wanted to hide him away. And the fact that he is, due to what turns out to be brainwashing, he is arrested and potentially given the death penalty, which, jumping right to the end, fortunately he does, get released and everything. But this is honestly such a potential tragic end, and you really do feel it in these early scenes when he has been arrested. It is so sad to see Isaiah in this way, and he even, kind of refuses help from Sam. It's a very tragic case, and I think the emotional beats of this story really do resonate, and a lot of them relate to Isaiah. But moving on, we have another new character, that being Ruth Bat-Saraf, or Sabra, a classic character from the comics. She is generally an Israel-based superhero. I don't really know too much about her from the comics. She's not a character that I've really followed too closely, and in the current political climate, it must be said, it was a kind of questionable choice to have, an Israelite superhero. I realize that, it is different, but it felt a little bit weird watching it. Fortunately, due to very obvious reshoots and changes to the story, it is kind of pushed aside. She is made into an ex-widow, I guess, that's now fighting on the side of the US government, as, essentially Ross's personal bodyguard. Very interesting dynamic there. But yeah, Ruth is definitely an interesting character. I actually quite enjoyed her throughout this film. But yeah, there are some undertones, more in the meta sense that feel a little bit weird about having Sabra in this movie. And they never actually call Sabra, for the record. She also doesn't ever have her actual Sabra outfit from the comics or anything, even though there are some promotional shots and some other images that show her wearing it. We never see her explicitly wearing anything that really resembles the Sabra outfit. And I think a lot of that is for the best. They probably just didn't want to push it too hard with the current real-world political climate. But, yeah, Ruth, overall, good character. I did quite enjoy her in the movie, which was quite surprising. I was expecting her to be a kind of nothing character, just another, vaguely militarized character that can, assist Sam and Falcon. Also, I'm going to call Joaquin Falcon more than I'm going to call him Joaquin, unlike Sam, who I won't really call Cap or call Sam. It's just, I don't know, something about saying Joaquin, I know I'll say it wrong at some point, so I'm just avoiding that. So yeah, it'll be Falcon. I'll try and alternate between Sam and Cap when it comes to talking about him. But yeah, when it comes to Ruth, I think she's a good character. There's some weird undertones there. But all of the incident with Isaiah basically leads to Sam, Captain America, being removed from his government position. He's no longer supposed to be working on behalf of, the president or anything else. And it is a very interesting scene from Sam where he essentially goes, maybe I want to be the bad guy for once. Maybe I don't want to follow orders. Maybe I don't want to do this, that, the other. And I feel like it is a very major turning point for Sam isn't, Steve Rogers. He's not like a goody two-shoes who bends the rules. He's someone who's willing to go fully against the rules in order to do the right thing. And I think that's a really strong characterization for Sam, and we do get some other moments that kind of lean on that sort of idea that he is someone to look up to, but not in like a godly status like we see with Steve, but more of like he is someone you can potentially be. You can one day get to that point if you work really hard and you try really hard and you have a good moral compass and everything. And I think that's a really good message overall. We are introduced to the prisoner who has escaped from his prison, which I'll get to in a moment. And he's also found out to be the buyer of which the Serpent Society was working with, and this is revealed by Sidewinder, classic villain leader of the Serpent Society, and he reveals that this buyer can predict events and actually is able to predict the way that Captain America is able to fight, and the fact that he's able to survive a car being blown up that he's driving and stuff like that. And we'll get into why this is a little bit of a weird thing overall, but for now, kind of interesting. I was definitely, even though I knew what the reveal would be, I was interested. It kept me interested in the overall plot, and yeah, generally, it's a good point, and it's a good, element to be thinking about of, oh, so it's someone that's predicting things. It's, it's someone that has precognition, maybe, something like that, and we'll get into it, but yeah, definitely an interesting element to this film, it must be said. So the prison, I suppose, that this prisoner, this buyer, is supposed to be held at is Camp Echo 1, classic from the comics and stuff like that. But yeah, it is a communications base, which happens to also be a prison, along with a lab and various other things. And in order to actually go there, we are given a brand new design for Captain America's suit, for Sam Wilson's suit. And I don't necessarily like this one. It's blue, as its like primary color compared to the white, which, the earlier suit was. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the white suit that he was given at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But I think in some ways it is better than this blue suit. This blue suit is a little bit too Steve Rogers-y. It's a little bit too Winter Soldier style, and I don't know, there's something about it I'm just not a huge fan of, but it's still a good suit, and it does look good. It does also get damaged at the end of the film, so I'm sure he'll have yet another design of suit in the next film, but yeah, new blue suit, not a huge fan, but it is still pretty fun, and the whole gimmick with the helmet and stuff, which we have obviously seen from other Wakandan gear, is pretty nice. It's a good effect, and it also means that you don't have to have Sam constantly taking off a helmet and putting on a helmet and stuff like that. It's all automatic. It's all, in terms of effects, it's all CGI, and it does make a lot of sense to do it like that. So we move on, and we have the actual various shooters, so those previously said Secret Service, military, whatever else, that turned on the president, they are killed by a guard who then kills himself. And that was, obviously it wasn't shown on screen, but that was a very shocking scene to me, something that I hadn't had any inklings of, and that is honestly terrifying in the context of this being brainwashing and stuff like that, which, by this point we know that there's flashing on the screens that actually triggered all the different people that attacked Ross, and we kind of assume that it's going to be brainwashing, but yeah, the fact that it's this powerful level, and, despite knowing, as I say, who the big bad was, I was starting to get convinced maybe there was some sort of psychic or some sort of, Charles Xavier style character like hidden in the background somewhere, because the ways in which, I may as well just reveal it, Samuel Stearns, the leader, the way he was able to control these people was like perfect. He had no issues with it, and it was incredibly insane in some ways how he was able to just like kill people and get people to kill people for him and stuff without really any effort on his part. It was actually kind of crazy. Isaiah, because of this, is moved solitary confinement for his own protection, which I think is a questionable move, but yeah, I'm not really going to question that too much. It does end up working out in the end. And that leaves us to the major, third act, essentially, because all this up till now has just been the build-up to the main events. That being the fact that Japan and the US are about to potentially start a war. Japan believes that the adamantium, which, was stolen by the Serpent Society, that was the entire reason that Captain America was after the Serpent Society, was actually stolen from Japan by the US government. And technically it was true, because Stearns was the person who paid for the Serpent Society to steal it. But also, it's kind of a stupid thing of Ross won't tell the truth or the full truth, that, there's actually a person working against the government from inside the government, stuff like that. They have a mole, essentially, that is specifically trying to ruin Ross's reputation. Very interesting sort of case. But with Cap and Falcon actually finding Echo 1 and, actually finding Samuel Stearns, the leader, who, I'll get into it in a moment, but he looks weird. They are then put under attack by various guards of Echo 1, at which point Sabra comes by and actually helps them escape, which, once again, as much as I may have issues with Sabra in some aspects of her, meta sense, she's a good character, she's a good widow alike, and generally I think that it makes sense to have a character like that filling in for what would have been typically, Natasha Romanoff. Especially because they don't want to bring in characters that are currently doing things like Thunderbolts and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a very good dynamic overall. I'm not going to get too much into that now, but yeah, Sabra helps them escape from Echo 1, and they almost get arrested before all of the military that were arresting them suddenly get turned by Mr. Blue playing, and yeah, that then leads to them escaping, and they managed to get away, actually managed to get all the way back to help, well, not necessarily help, but go against Ross fighting Japan. No, not Japan. Japan is not what I meant to say there. Ross is getting angrier and angrier, and we can assume by this point he has been taking pills throughout the movie. It's to do with that. And he actually full-on smashes a table. Only a crack in it, but it is a pretty big crack on this table. This, I don't know what it would technically be, but this stone-ish table. And no one seems to think much of it. He just does it in anger, and everyone just kind of goes along with the day, sort of thing. To be fair, they do shut up because he had been getting angry at them, talking to him, talking over each other, and just generally causing his anxiety to raise. But yeah, this is the first inkling we've got that he's actually got something happening in terms of his anger. Truly, something is changing with him. And, of course, he becomes Red Hulk. We'll get to that in a moment. But, yeah, moving on from that, we do actually have Cap going to his various friends from the SEALs, and actually getting a test of the medication done, because they want to know what's actually happening with that medication, what is it doing to Ross. And there is a vague reference, not explicit, but they do technically reference Amadeus Cho, And I don't know how to feel about it. It makes sense because it is obviously a Hulk adjacent story, with two characters from the Hulkverse, three I guess if you want to count Betty, appearing in the film. But yeah, there's a vague reference to Amadeus Cho, who is of course Hulkling. I think is technically what he's called, but he is just a different Hulk variant. And yeah, very interesting reference. It doesn't go anywhere, and the entire plot point actually doesn't go anywhere because the seal gets killed by the leader. But yeah, it's interesting the way they did that. But yeah, while they're doing all that, they do get some information from Sidewinder about it all, about the fact that it's Samuel Stearns and that he's planning on causing issues for Ross. And we then find out that Ross upped Stearns' gamma supply per pill. So the actual pills are full of gamma radiation, and over the years, it's been increasing and increasing and increasing to literally poison Ross with gamma radiation in order to turn him into a Hulkling. A Hulk creature, I guess. But I guess I don't know how to describe them really. Turn him into a Hulk. And yeah, we do have a confrontation between Cap and Ross on the boat. And in general, it goes pretty well. We have an entire setup of Captain America and the Falcon fighting against rogue pilots, Jackal and Whiskey, against the Japanese fleet as well. Not actually fighting against the Japanese fleet, but trying to stop Jackal and Whiskey from fighting the Japanese fleet. I think I've confused that a little bit, but that all ends with Jackal and Whiskey being successfully stopped, and Falcon is hit by a missile and plummets into the ocean, which very reminiscent of Rhodey, and I feel like that's kind of what they were going for. They were going for like a Rhodey adjacent event, just like in Civil War, where the teammate is defeated or in other ways taken out of the fight, and it is kind of important for the rest of the movie to happen that happens. But yeah, I was not knowing what the outcome for Falcon was, I was very worried that he was actually going to die. Fortunately, he does recover by the end, and he's probably going to be the Falcon for the future. But yeah, it was definitely a concern that maybe he was actually dead. They do show him floating in the water with like a life preserver on him, so it can be assumed that he survives and everything beforehand. But yeah, there were some moments that I was a bit worried. But yeah, we do have the conclusion of the Japanese-US, potential war. Essentially, it's found to be, neutrally fine, I suppose. There's a ceasefire between them, and it kind of all works out in the end. So then we move on to the cameo by Bucky, which is, in the viewing room, I suppose, for the operation room of Falcon. And, yeah, Bucky just kind of turns up so that he can foreshadow the events of Thunderbolts, and that's really it. He does reassure Cap that like he's doing the right thing and that Steve was actually right to choose him and stuff like that. But otherwise, Bucky doesn't really appear for anything other than for Ruth to then just kind of go, oh, he's kind of fit. Like, ironically, that's kind of what she does. Which I thought was a funny line, to be fair. It's delivered pretty well, but yeah, very odd cameo by Bucky, and it makes sense. This is the follow-up directly to Falcon the Winter Soldier. It only makes sense that both Sam and Bucky get to reunite. But yeah, definitely a bit of a questionable one in some regards. So yeah, Stearns hands himself over. And this is the point at which I'm just going to talk about the way that they actually designed the leader. He looks so weird. And I know that in the comics, depending on which version you're looking at, the leader sometimes does have that kind of like brain texture on his head. But it looks weird, and it's not big enough. Like, if you're going to go with the brain sort of like lumpiness, you need to make it like a ball on his head. You need to make it like large. And if you're not going to do that, if you're just going to have it be a big head, even if you are going to put some texturing into it, you actually need it to be tall. And it's neither. It's just, he just has a normal head with a slightly enlarged cranium, especially around the back, and it's lumpy with like brain texture. And it really doesn't work. And, I will say, in general, Samuel Stearns, the leader, is a very well acted character. In general, I think they do a good job of explaining him. But he looks wrong. and I don't like it. And it's very telling that a lot of the merchandise have a much more comic accurate style for the leader. The Funko Pop, for example, there's some t-shirts as well, some official merchandise t-shirts that actually have him with the tall head, just like he does in the comics. And I personally think that that would have looked a lot better. Like, it's goofier, fair enough, but it isn't just weird. And I don't know, I prefer something to look a little bit more goofy than weird. And yeah, it really just doesn't work for me. I think overall, it's really just not a good look. And yeah, unfortunately, it's what we're stuck with. You know, I'm sure they could do what they do with the Abomination, and in the future, when Stearns turns up, they could have him have, the taller head, the smoother skin, that sort of thing. They could adjust him to make him look a bit better, like they did with Abomination. But I'm not holding my breath by any means. It's just, to me, it's not a great situation to have. It's not an ideal visualization for the leader, because he is such an iconic character. I think a lot of people that are just a fan of the Hulk in general will know the leader. And when they got Red Hulk, as we're going to get to, so right aesthetically, it's a real shame that, the leader just looks wrong. But, yeah, at this point, we then have Ross giving a speech, at which point he's questioned in a lot of ways that make him stressed out, and then suddenly Stearns appears, in quotes, is played over the loudspeakers, which angers him enough, along with his Secret Service trying to pull him away from the microphone, for him to Hulk up. And he turns into, of course, Red Hulk. And this is a character we've been waiting for a long time. We've been expecting this for a while. And, as I say, Red Hulk is kind of spot on. The attention to detail with him is excellent. Obviously, we've had plenty of Hulk characters, before, and all of it has added up into having literally the Hulk version of Harrison Ford, and I cannot complain. He looks great. He has the fire touch ability where things like set on fire and things melt and stuff like that, and just in general, very good characterization, very good design, and overall really works well in this movie. So they fight in the White House, and yeah, they absolutely destroy the White House. I was shocked at how far they actually went with it. Like, half the White House is just gone through this fight. We see the introduction of these helicopter drones. They are literally like full-size helicopters with, instead of a cockpit, they have like a minigun like in the place of, which obviously get destroyed very quickly by Red Hulk. Sam does a pretty good job overall of protecting both the military and the civilians that are, in Red Hulk's, crosshairs, I suppose. And yeah, overall, it goes very, very well. He pulls him away from the White House. They end up destroying the Washington Monument, at least minorly, which is, especially after that's already happened in the MCU through the events of No Way Home. Oh, sorry. Is it No Way Home or is it Far From Home? I can't remember which one it is. But, Homecoming. It might be Homecoming. Whichever one it is of the Spider-Man trilogy where the Washington Monument is involved. It's very funny to see it, have damage again, because it means that they're, once again, canonically having to fix it, which is just, I don't know, I find that funny, personally. But we have a very good fight surrounded by the cherry blossoms, which have been mentioned a few times throughout the film, but yeah, it's a very good set piece, obviously, with the Japanese influence throughout the film. It's very nice to see something like cherry blossoms. It is a very common thing within Washington, and it just really fits with the overall vibe of the film, and the fight is really good. I think I said already that the fights with Captain America really just prove how good Sam is in the role, and he gets some real good hits in, and he manages to avoid, for the most part, most of Hulk's attacks, Red Hulk's attacks, and he manages to stab Ross with his energized single wing, so at this point he's had a wing ripped off, and just blasts him with Wakandan built-up energy, and it's just, oh boy, I was so sure Ross was dead at this point. I was under the impression that this was it for Ross, that, this was the end. I was shocked when it turned out he was actually fine. But he is heavily injured. For some reason, Red Hulk specifically can be, cut and doesn't, heal in the same way that the regular Hulk does and She-Hulk does. I don't know why that is necessarily. It might just be because, whereas with, Hulk, Leader, Abomination, She-Hulk, that's all the same blood, the same radiator blood in the same way. With Ross, it's him irradiated with gamma over years, so it might just be that is like a slight difference with genetics or whatever else. But yeah, he's injured. He's like putting him up, to have a little bit of a fisticuffs and stuff. And Cap manages to talk Ross down. He turns back to human form and is immediately arrested. Well, he's actually taken to hospital first, but he's arrested for doing all the various crimes that he's just done in the last few minutes. But Isaiah, as I said before, is released from prison, fully exonerated, because obviously it wasn't him, it was the leader, and then Ross did horrible things as well, so it can't really be defended too much. And we do find that Ross has been locked up at the raft. Weirdly enough, Helmut Zemo is in the background, is in a background cell at the raft in the same area that Ross is in, which is a nice little Easter egg for those who have watched Captain America? Falcon the Winter Soldier. That messed me up for a second. But yeah, Helmut Zemo is actually in the raft still, which is kind of fun. We do see Betty. She visits Ross in prison. And we are shown that Falcon survived and he wants to have a Wakandan suit. And yeah, we basically end with the idea that Sam wants to bring back the Avengers, like officially. He wants to actually do it. He wants to find members and he wants to bring it all together, have the team back. And yeah, that is the film. We of course have the post-credit, which is Cap visiting Stearns at the raft, and Stearns, the leader, predicts an incursion. Essentially, this is probably the events of Doomsday that he's describing, but yeah, pretty simple post-credit, nothing too special. And that is the film. So, yeah, it's a film, alright. So, my overall conclusion is that this is a decent enough film that clearly suffered from late-stage rewrites, reshoots, and as much as I haven't mentioned it, there is some pretty obvious ADR, but I still enjoyed it. The action scenes are quality, there are plenty of good character moments, and the cast are generally doing a great job of what they were given. The final edit feels a lot better than I expected, based on the trailers, with some of the oddly structured moments shown in adverts and previews and stuff like that clearly being touched up in the editing room, but there was still clearly a lot left on the cut room floor, which may have made the overall narrative work better. It's hard to say without actually knowing what these cutscenes are, but yeah, there's definitely some stuff missing, it feels like, in parts, despite the narrative as a whole feeling pretty cohesive. Tim Blake Nelson, as I say, tries his best as Samuel Stearns, and he's generally just let down by what I consider to be subpar dialogue and terrible visual effects. Also, his characterization with the whole like predicting outcomes and stuff is kind of odd. And yeah, I generally think he does a good job. It's just not the perfect leader that I've been waiting for however many years since The Incredible Hulk. Sam Wilson is Captain America, and Anthony Mackie carries the film. Like, that is definitive, in my opinion. Like, Sam is Captain America. Like, in the same way that Steve was, and Anthony Mackie is just doing a great job throughout. Absolutely no complaints when it comes to him. His characterization, the performance, all of it is just great as a whole. This isn't the return to form for the MCU I've been hoping for, but it is still an enjoyable, if flawed, entry into this overstuffed franchise. And yeah, overall, I did enjoy it. So, with that being said, I give Captain America Brave New World a 3.5 out of 5 stars, or a 7 out of 10. And I think that's a very fair rating. It's by no means, up there with other Captain America movies. I think it's probably the weakest of the Captain America movies so far. But I still enjoyed it. And it does make me look forward to, watching Thunderbolts and the various other projects that have come out and are coming out over the next few months and years for Marvel, because it shows that Marvel hasn't fully lost it. They're just a little bit weaker than they were. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end with this. But yeah, with that being said, it's going to be it from me. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like it, subscribe, and enter, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Otherwise, comment below your thoughts and feelings on Captain America Brave New World. And I'll see you next time. Bye. It's been a long week. I feel like I could use a vacation. I can hardly think. It's like the worst song you've ever heard on every station.